My daughter-in-law left her 2 sons at my old house, promising to return in 4 hours. She never came back, betraying everyone. 8 years later, she sued me for kidnapping her children, demanding justice. But when I handed the judge a mysterious envelope, he asked, "Do they know what's inside?" I replied, "Not yet." That truth changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel True Family Revenge Stories and let me know in the comments. What would you do if your family tried to take away the children you've raised as your own? It was a quiet Sunday morning when I first noticed the car on the horizon. I was out in the field, tending to the fences on my farm in Texas, when I saw the familiar silhouette of a dusty sedan winding its way down the long dirt road leading to my ranch. My heart skipped a beat, and for some reason, I knew it wasn't just anyone. This wasn't the usual neighbor popping by for a chat, or the occasional visitor asking for directions. No, this car held a meaning far greater. I straightened up, wiped my hands on my worn-out jeans, and squinted into the distance. There she was, Linda Jacobs, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had walked away from her 2 boys without a word, without even a glance back. Linda had always been a free spirit, someone who never stayed in one place for too long. But when she married my son, Kevin, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally settled down. I had no idea how wrong I was. Her hair was a little shorter now, and she had traded her carefree, youthful demeanor for a more polished, almost arrogant air. She stepped out of the car in a sharp black business suit, heels clicking on the gravel as she made her way toward the porch. I could see the nervous energy in her movements, and a sick feeling rose in my stomach. "Linda," I called out, my voice steady, although my mind was racing. She stopped in her tracks, her back stiffening as she recognized my voice. After a moment, she turned, her face quickly regaining composure as she flashed a practiced smile. "Hello, Hank," she said, her tone polite but distant. "It's been a long time. 8 years, to be exact." I didn't answer right away, just studying her. The way she stood there, like she was expecting something. Maybe some warm welcome, maybe a confrontation. But what she didn't expect was me. Not like this. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice colder now. Linda hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she spoke. "I've come for the boys. I want them back." My breath caught in my throat. She dared to come back and demand what? Her sons? The ones she had left behind without a second thought? "Your sons," I repeated, my voice rising. "Linda, you lost the right to call them that the day you walked out on them." Her gaze faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, taking a step closer. "You don't understand, Hank," she said, her voice low but firm. "I had to leave. I was lost, but I'm better now. I've worked on myself. I want my children back." I shook my head, the anger bubbling to the surface. "Better? 8 years later, and now you want to come back and play the part of their mother? You don't get to do that, Linda." Her face darkened as she stepped even closer. "You've kept them from me. You've brainwashed them, made them think you're their father. But I'm their mother, Hank, and I want them back. I'll go to court if I have to." I stepped forward, meeting her gaze head-on. "No, you don't get to take them from me. Not after everything you've done to them. They're my boys now. I raised them, and I won't let you tear them away from the life we've built." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she turned and walked back to her car without another word. She didn't look back as she drove away, but I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, knowing deep down that this was far from over. The sound of Linda's car fading in the distance was like a signal that my peace, the fragile routine I had built with my grandsons, had just been shattered. I stood there on the porch, staring at the empty road, knowing that everything was about to change. For the past 8 years, it had been just me, Jake, and Tim, building a life together. When Linda left, she took all the promises of a happy family with her, but she left behind 2 innocent boys who needed a father's touch more than ever. Tim nodded, his teenage stubbornness kicking in. "She's not our mom anymore. You are. We're not going anywhere." I felt a surge of pride in that moment. My boys. They were strong. They were loyal. And they weren't going to let anyone, especially their own mother, tear us apart. The next few days were a blur. I knew that Linda would be back, and I needed to be ready. I had to gather everything, all the proof I had, that she had abandoned her parental rights. The note she'd left me 8 years ago was my first piece of ammunition. I'd kept it all these years, not because I ever thought I'd need it, but because it was the only thing that truly showed what she had done. She had walked away, and now she was trying to rewrite history. I spent the night going through everything, every document, every memory. When I went to bed that night, the weight of what was coming settled in. I couldn't let Linda take them away. I couldn't let her destroy the family we had built from nothing. As I lay in bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the farm outside, I thought about how much had changed in 8 years. How much the boys had grown, how much they had flourished under my care. But more than anything, I thought about how I wasn't going to let Linda take them back. Not without a fight. The next morning, I had a meeting with Emily Carter, the local lawyer I had hired to handle this mess. She was sharp, experienced, and above all, she knew how to win. As I made my way to her office, I could feel the weight of the impending battle pressing down on me. But I knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, I would do everything I could to keep my family together. The road to the courthouse was long, but the road to protecting my boys was even longer. But I was ready. Linda had made her choice 8 years ago. Now, it was time for me to make mine. The days leading up to the court hearing felt like an eternity. The quiet tension that had hung in the air for weeks was now palpable. I couldn't stop thinking about what was at stake, the future of Tim and Jake, the boys I had raised and loved like my own. It was all coming down to this moment. The morning of the court hearing arrived faster than I was ready for. I had already reviewed everything. The evidence, the testimonies, the strategy. I'd spent the last few days preparing, going over my notes, ensuring that every detail was accounted for. Emily Carter, the lawyer I hired, was a seasoned professional. She'd assured me we had a strong case, but I couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. The reality of standing in front of a judge, fighting for the lives of my grandsons, was daunting. I woke up early that morning, feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. Tim and Jake were still asleep, their faces peaceful, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I stood in front of the mirror, fixing my tie, then adjusting it a few more times, like I could somehow find the right knot to calm my nerves. I walked downstairs, making coffee in the kitchen as I always did. It was a comforting routine, one that I knew wouldn't change, no matter how many times life tried to throw curveballs my way. I set 2 cups on the table, thinking of how much the boys had grown over the past 8 years. Tim, now 15, had matured into a young man with a fierce sense of loyalty. Jake, at 13, was still the sensitive, artistic kid who loved to draw and ask questions about the world. They were strong, they were resilient, and they were my everything. I poured myself a cup of coffee, letting the warmth calm my hands as I sipped slowly. The next few hours were going to change everything. Tim and Jake finally came downstairs, bleary-eyed and yawning, their morning energy slowly seeping in. They were unaware of the monumental battle awaiting them in the courtroom, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. They needed to know what was going on. They needed to be prepared for the fight we were about to face. "Boys, it's time," I said, my voice more serious than I'd ever heard it. They both froze for a moment, sensing the shift in my tone. Tim set down his cereal bowl, his eyes narrowing with concern. "Is it today?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, today's the day. Your mother is going to try to take you back, but we're going to fight. We're going to make sure she knows exactly what she did, and we're going to make sure the judge knows what's best for you." Jake, ever the softer one, looked up at me with a mix of confusion and determination. "But Grandpa, we want to stay with you. You're our family." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "And that's exactly why we're going to fight. Because you're my family too. And no one is going to take you away from me." The words were easier to say than I believed. Linda had never wanted them, not in the way a mother should. She left, and for 8 years, I had done everything in my power to fill the void she left behind. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And now, she was coming back, with legal papers and a vendetta, trying to claim the family she had so callously walked away from. We all piled into the truck, the boys chatting nervously about school, baseball, and whatever else was occupying their young minds. They were trying to keep things light, trying to act like this wasn't such a big deal, but I could see the unease in their eyes. They were both so much like their father, Kyle, quiet, thoughtful, but unafraid to stand up for what was right. I remember the night she walked out like it was yesterday. The boys were already in bed, and I had just finished dinner when I heard Linda's car screech down the driveway. It was past midnight, but I could tell something was wrong. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside just in time to see her loading her things into the trunk of her car. She didn't look back, didn't say a word. It was like she was running from something much bigger than the two little boys who had once called her their mother. She drove off into the night, leaving me standing there, stunned and helpless. I went inside and looked at the boys sleeping in their beds. Jake, only 5, had his little stuffed elephant clutched in his arms, and Tim, a bit older at 7, was already growing restless in his sleep, twitching at the sounds of his mother's departure. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next, but deep down, I knew what I had to do. I had to keep them safe. I had to keep my promise to my son, Kyle, who had passed away a year earlier from cancer. It was only a year before Linda's departure that Kyle had begged me on his deathbed, his voice frail, his hands shaking as he gripped mine. "Take care of them, Dad. Please, don't let her fail them." That was the last thing my son ever said to me, and I had promised him I would. But now, 8 years later, Linda was coming back, demanding her children as if she had some right to them. The very idea that she would try to walk into my life again after all this time, after what she'd put the boys through, made my blood boil. But I knew this wasn't about being angry, it was about being prepared. I wasn't about to lose them. Not to her. Not after everything we had gone through. After Linda left, the boys had been devastated at first. Jake had spent weeks asking when his mom was coming back, even though he was only 5. He had a sweet, sensitive nature, and her absence hit him the hardest. Tim, on the other hand, was a little older and could understand more, but that didn't make it any easier. He had tried to play the role of the man of the house, comforting his little brother and taking on responsibilities that no boy his age should. I had stepped in, doing my best to be both a father and a grandfather. I was there for everything: baseball games, school plays, science projects, birthday parties. I made sure they always felt loved, always felt wanted. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. For the first year, it was rough. They missed their mother terribly, even though she wasn't the mother they needed. But as time passed, they began to settle into a new life. A life with me. A life where they were cared for, where they were loved and protected. By the time Jake was 8 and Tim was 10, the wound of losing their mother had healed, though the scar was always there. It was an unspoken understanding between the 3 of us. They would never have the mother they deserved, but they had me, steadfast, always present. I thought that was it. I thought that Linda had made her choice, that she had walked away and abandoned her family for good. I had no idea that 8 years later, she would come back with legal papers, claiming I had kidnapped her children. The morning after Linda showed up at my house, I sat down with the boys over breakfast. They didn't know what was coming, not yet. They were blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to descend on us. Tim was eating his usual bowl of cereal, and Jake was making a mess with his toast, but I knew I had to tell them. "Boys, we need to talk," I said, my voice a little firmer than usual. They both stopped mid-bite, sensing that something wasn't right. "Your mother came by yesterday." Tim's face darkened at the mention of her name, but Jake looked up, confused. "What do you mean? Is she coming back?" I hesitated. How do you explain to a 13-year-old boy that the mother he's been hoping for all these years had come back not with apologies and love, but with threats and demands? How do you explain that after all this time, she was going to rip apart the family that had raised them? "She wants to take you away," I said quietly. Jake's face lit up with hope. "We're going to live with her?" "No," Tim said firmly, shaking his head. "She left us, Jake. She walked out on us. Grandpa, you've been more of a parent to me than she ever was." I placed my hand on Tim's shoulder, grateful for his loyalty, but also heartbroken. He shouldn't have to be the one comforting his little brother. "Listen to me," I said, looking between them. "She's going to try to take you back. She's filed legal papers. She's claiming I kidnapped you." The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of my words settled in. I could see the shock in their eyes, the confusion as they processed what this meant. Tim spoke first, his voice fierce. "She can't do that. You're our dad now. She left us. I don't want to go with her." "I don't want to go either," Jake added quietly, his voice wavering. "You've been there for us, Grandpa." My heart ached at the look of trust in their eyes. I had worked so hard, for so many years, to make them feel safe, to make them feel like they were home. And now this woman, this stranger who had abandoned them, was going to try and rip it all away. "You won't go anywhere, boys." "I won't let her take you," I said firmly, though my voice trembled just a bit. "We'll fight for you. We'll fight together." The courthouse was only a short drive from our farm, but the journey felt like it took hours. I was hyper-aware of the sounds of the truck's engine, the hum of the tires on the road, and the boys' conversation in the back seat. All of it seemed like a blur, like I was trapped in slow motion, waiting for a moment that I couldn't undo. When we arrived, the courthouse loomed ahead, a massive structure that felt more like a fortress than a place for justice. As we entered the building, the weight of the situation hit me harder than I expected. People milled around, going about their business, but none of that mattered to me right now. I wasn't just another person in this building. I was a grandfather, fighting for the future of his grandsons. We sat in a waiting area, and I could feel the tension building between us. There were a few other people scattered around the room, none of them looking familiar, but I couldn't help but feel like we were all in the same fight for something bigger than ourselves. I glanced over at the boys. Tim was pacing, checking his phone, trying to look busy. Jake was quieter, his hand fiddling with a pencil he found on the table. I could see it in his face, the uncertainty, the fear of what might happen in the courtroom. Then the door opened, and I saw Emily Carter walk in, her professional demeanor and calm confidence immediately reassuring me. She had everything prepared, every document, every strategy. I had trusted her with everything, and I was beginning to believe that we might actually have a chance at winning this. "Mr. Hanson," she said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "Are you ready?" I nodded, feeling my resolve settle back into place. "As ready as I'll ever be." The courtroom doors swung open, and we entered, walking past Linda and her attorney. I could feel her eyes on me, the look of betrayal and anger clear in her gaze. She hadn't changed. She was still the same woman who had walked away from her family, and now she was trying to make herself out to be the victim. Her lawyer, Richards, stood tall beside her, all polished suits and expensive cologne. I knew what he was thinking. He thought this was going to be easy. He thought I'd back down. But he didn't know me. He didn't know what I would do to protect my grandsons. We sat down at our designated table, and Judge Harlan Brooks entered. The judge was a man who commanded respect, someone who had seen it all in his years on the bench. He didn't have time for theatrics or stories that weren't backed up by facts. He was the kind of man who would weigh the evidence and make his decision based on that, and I had something Linda didn't have: truth. "Court is now in session," the judge announced, his voice carrying through the room. "Case number 2025, FC 147, Miller versus Hanson, regarding the custody of minors Timothy and Jacob Hanson." Richard stood up to deliver his opening statement, and I felt the familiar surge of anger rising in me. His words were full of empty promises and manipulations, painting Linda as the mother who had been robbed of her children due to her grief and illness. But I knew the truth. Linda hadn't been a victim. She had been an abuser of trust. She had walked away, and now she was trying to rewrite history. When it was my turn to speak, Emily motioned for me to stand. My legs were stiff, but I stood tall, walking to the witness stand with a calm I didn't know I had in me. Judge Brooks looked at me, his gaze steady. "Mr. Hanson, tell the court about your relationship with the children," the judge said. I cleared my throat, looking out at the courtroom full of strangers. Linda was sitting at the plaintiff's table, her eyes locked on me with a venom I hadn't seen in years. "They're my sons," I said simply. "I've been their father for 8 years. I've raised them. I've been there for them when they needed me most. When Tim broke his leg, I was there. When Jake had nightmares about his mother, I was the one who held him until he could sleep. These boys belong with me. They always have." Linda's attorney objected, but Judge Brooks didn't seem fazed. He was listening. I could tell. He was paying attention to every word. "Ms. Miller has claimed that I kept her from contacting her children," I continued. "But that's not true. She chose to walk away. She chose to leave her children in my care, and I've done everything in my power to give them a stable, loving home. At that moment, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope that contained the note Linda had written 8 years ago. I held it up for the judge to see. The courtroom fell silent as everyone waited for what was coming next. "This note," I said, "was left by Linda the night she walked away. It's her own handwriting. It says that she couldn't be the mother the boys deserved and that she wanted me to raise them. It's a document that proves she gave up her rights as a mother. And I've kept it all these years." The judge's eyes narrowed as he read the note. Linda's face paled, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: guilt. Richards was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, this document has not been authenticated, and it should not be admissible." But the judge raised his hand, silencing the room. "I'll allow it," he said firmly. "Ms. Miller, do you recognize this handwriting?" For the first time since the trial began, Linda hesitated. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I was in a bad place. I didn't mean it. But it was too late. The truth had already come out." The tension in the courtroom could be felt by everyone as the judge continued to read the note aloud. The atmosphere had shifted. What had once been an emotional tug-of-war was now a battle of truth against manipulation. The truth was that Linda had abandoned her children, and the truth was that I had kept my promise to Kyle to protect and raise his boys. Judge Harlan Brooks set the note down, his gaze steady and unwavering as he turned toward Linda. The silence was deafening as he addressed her. "Ms. Miller, this note clearly indicates that you voluntarily relinquished your parental rights. You chose to leave your children in the care of Mr. Hansen. There is no ambiguity here. This document will weigh heavily in this case." Linda's eyes welled up with tears, but the practiced sorrow in her expression was no match for the gravity of the situation. She tried to speak, but her words faltered, a weak attempt to reclaim control. I was grieving. I couldn't handle it. I needed time to heal," she stammered, her voice breaking in all the right places. "But it was too late. Emily was ready for this." "Your Honor, I'm not here to invalidate Ms. Miller's grief," Emily interjected, her voice calm but firm. "We understand the pain of losing a spouse. But grief does not absolve one of the responsibility to their children. Ms. Miller didn't need time to heal at the expense of her children's well-being. She had 8 years to be part of their lives, and she chose to walk away." The room went silent again as Judge Brooks let the words hang in the air. There was no counterargument from Linda's attorney. The truth was too clear. The judge took a moment to gather his thoughts, his eyes scanning the courtroom with an authoritative presence. "Mr. Hansen, you have clearly demonstrated the depth of your commitment to Tim and Jake," he said. "The court has reviewed the evidence, and it's clear that you have been their primary caregiver, both legally and emotionally, for 8 years. You've provided them with a stable, loving home. And, while we understand that Ms. Miller may have had her reasons for leaving, those reasons do not change the fact that she abandoned her children." My heart pounded in my chest as the judge turned to Linda, his expression serious. "Ms. Miller, you are not only fighting for custody based on your own version of events, but also against 8 years of stable, loving care provided by Mr. Hansen. The law, in this case, recognizes the importance of the child's attachment to their primary caregiver. The children have made it clear where they want to be." Linda stood up abruptly, as if to protest, but the judge's voice cut through her attempt. "You may speak, but I have already made my decision. The court finds in favor of Mr. Hansen. You, Ms. Miller, have lost the right to claim custody over Tim and Jake. You have had no contact with them for 8 years, and now, as per the evidence presented, the court rules that they will remain in Mr. Hansen's custody. No visitation rights are to be granted at this time." I could hardly believe it. The weight of the decision hadn't fully sunk in until I saw Linda's face crumble. The tears she had been trying so desperately to hold back finally spilled over as her mask shattered. She collapsed into her attorney's arms, sobbing uncontrollably, but there was no sympathy left in me for her. This wasn't about sorrow or pity, it was about justice. As Emily and I stood up to leave the courtroom, Tim and Jake walked toward me, their faces filled with an overwhelming mixture of relief and disbelief. We had won. The battle was over, and they were staying with me. "Grandpa, it's really over?" Jake asked, his voice trembling as he looked up at me. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It's really over, son. The boys hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I allowed myself to hold them, breathing in the sweet scent of their childhood. Linda had tried to tear us apart, but she couldn't. We were stronger than that. We were a family, and nothing could change that. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt hopeful. We were going home to the farm, our farm, and we were going to keep building the life that Kyle had wanted for his boys. As we walked to the truck, Tim asked, "Grandpa, can we go to the diner? I'm starving." I chuckled, ruffling his hair. "You bet. I think we've all earned a good meal." As we drove away, I felt the sun shining down on us, the road ahead clear and open. We had won, not just in court, but in life. We had kept our family together, and that was worth everything. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to True Family Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in my position? To hear more incredible stories like this one, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next story.